can you give me a general idea of how codependency or people pleasing might show up for women?
Great question, for sure. It can manifest so many ways. Things that I'm just riffing. Things that come to mind are, perhaps you have trouble engaging in conflict. You have trouble speaking up for yourself. You find it really difficult to say no, almost as if there were some sort of like physical barrier preventing you from saying the words. Perhaps you feel like you are the party who is always seeking to resolve and mend in relationships, but others are not meeting you there.
Yeah.
Gosh, there are so many things. And I think at its core, another way it can manifest is just a reticence or a unwillingness to dive headfirst into your own needs or wants. Or maybe you feel guilty or selfish when you admit that you want something or that you need something, because we've been conditioned to think that others' needs matter more than our own.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that even, when I stopped drinking, I had been married for 14 years. And no matter how healthy or unhealthy, your relationship is, you have an established pattern. I had, for better or worse, set up my relationship with my husband where I, for example, would go to work and come home and be with the kids, right? He was a baseball coach and he was a dean of students at the time and just always had nighttime events. And so my needs were sort of on the back burner to whatever his schedule was. And I did feel a lot of resentment around that. I did feel very bored. I did feel like I wasn't getting what I needed or I wasn't happy. And therefore I sat on my couch and drank. And so when I quit drinking, you change those rules. I remember, needing to see my sober girlfriends more. I remembered prioritizing therapy. And, so he was in charge of one night a week, taking care of the kids and coming home and reworking his schedule, regardless of what came up. And that was, that was a negotiation that had never been set up before.
And kudos for, doing that, because I think those negotiations are really hard, especially with our partners, I think. And it's also wild because codependency can occur in any relationship. I mean, you can be codependent or a people pleaser and be totally single.
Yeah.
You can have codependent relationships with your parents, your kids, your friends, your colleagues. Any relationship in which you feel like you have to sacrifice your authentic self in order to perform a more acceptable version of you, I would argue that relationship probably has threads of codependency in it.
I love when you said a more acceptable version of you, because, I think, and I hear this in my clients all the time, I know for myself that like when you're a kid, you are taught consciously or unconsciously based on your family, what is an acceptable version of you. And whether it's being type A and always getting straight A's, or whether it is being quiet and amenable, or your value is based on your productivity or whatever, or excelling at sports, right? That is the acceptable version of you. And we internalize that. It becomes our own expectations.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's exactly true. And I even think, like you're saying, like productivity addiction or perfectionism, these are all like sort of themes, variants on the same theme.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to me about the women you work with and what you do, like how you help them sort of get more healthy in terms of relationships and boundaries and sense of self, relationship with themselves.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I always like to start with the premise that, right, like we talked about, codependency is a dysfunctional relationship with the self. And so I like to think of codependency recovery as happening in two distinct phases, if you will. And this is what I work on with my clients. So phase one is really where you strengthen and nourish this relationship with yourself. This is before you get into the boundaries, before you get into the romance. Like, this is all about you. And that alone, for so many women, is revolutionary, because these women, so many of us rarely take that time for ourselves. We think it's bad. We think it's wrong. And so that begins by, learning to identify your needs, learning to listen to your body when it tells you it needs something or feels something. And then just getting clear on, who are you as a human when you're, instead of just being like an appendage to someone else or someone else's dreams or goals, what are your independent dreams, goals, and values?
And that's so hard, right? You're almost deconditioning your entire history of what you've been taught, right? Because I know I always think of it as peeling back the layers or unbecoming. You're on this journey to become the person that you're taught to be, or what you think will give you the emotions that you want, right? Financial stability, other people thinking you're successful, whatever it is, right? And then there's that dissidence, whatever it is in your body that says, what I'm doing is making me anxious and uncomfortable and unhappy, but you don't know what it is.
That's right. Because we've been conditioned, like you're saying, like so thoroughly since childhood, for so many of us. And so similar, you say peeling back the onion. I love that. Or peeling back the layers. I think of it as an excavation. Oh. So like there's these layers of people pleasing and you're like digging beneath them to unearth something. It's there. It's not like it's not there. You just have to reclaim it after all that time, And so once we do that, once we get more in touch with our identity and our sense of self, that's when we go into phase 2, which is bringing that self we have within us into our external world, which includes our relationships, our actions, our boundaries, all that good stuff. And really, I think that when we bring that inner sense of self to our external environment, we just feel, I use the word like aligned. We just feel aligned with who we are inside and we don't have to perform anymore. And that is such a gift for so many of us who haven't felt that way before.
Yeah. And I assume that it's super uncomfortable in the process. Is that true?
It's so true. I like to think of it as, working a muscle, for so many of us, that muscle is kind of, it's been unused for a long time, sort of speaking our truth and setting boundaries. And so we have to work it out every day, do little workouts and strengthen it over time. Yeah. But it's hard.
Do you find that women feel guilty or apologetic? I mean, because we all have established relationships, whether it's with your boss, with your partner, or even with your kids, right? People are like, I have to do this for my kids. Like, I want to be that mom. It's like, yes, you do, but you're also telling me you're deeply unhappy. So what do we do with that conflict?
Mm-hmm. Totally. It's so hard. And by doing this work, I mean, it's real bravery. I don't even mean that as sort of like a feel good, like that's for real. Like it's brave and courageous.